Jason, ever the strategist, wasted no time coming up with a plan. He knew that confronting Rachel directly would require more than just a few words. It would require a careful approach to ensure that Rachel couldn't twist the situation to her advantage. "We need to hit her where it hurts," Jason said, pacing around their living room. "Rachel's used to getting what she wants, but we're going to make sure she knows there are consequences for her actions." Maria listened, still uneasy about seeing her sister again. She hadn't seen Rachel since the divorce, and the thought of facing her after everything that had happened made her stomach churn. But she knew Jason was right. Rachel couldn't keep manipulating their lives and walking away scot-free. Jason's plan was simple but effective. He would visit Rachel's house with his relatives, creating a presence that Rachel couldn't ignore. Jason's relatives, who had always been supportive of Maria, would be there to back her up, showing Rachel that this wasn't just about Maria. It was about holding her accountable for her actions. But Jason wasn't finished yet. "I've also been looking into Rachel's history," he continued, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Remember how she used to shop recklessly on credit cards? We can use that against her. We'll make sure she knows we're aware of the damage she's done and how far she's gone to try and get what she wants." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't thought about Rachel's credit card abuse in years, but it made perfect sense. Rachel's reckless spending and tendency to manipulate others were patterns she couldn't escape. Maria wasn't sure if she was ready to confront her sister again, but she knew this was the only way to put an end to the cycle. "I'll do it," Maria said quietly, her voice steady. "Let's go. Let's confront her. And this time, we're not backing down." The moment Maria stepped out of the car, she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Rachel's house stood in sharp contrast to Maria's modest, cozy home. It was sleek and modern, the kind of place that screamed wealth and excess, everything Maria had never cared about but knew Rachel thrived on. The tall iron gates and perfectly manicured lawn made Maria feel out of place, almost like she didn't belong in this world that Rachel had so easily crafted for herself. As they walked up the front path, Maria could feel the tension in the air. Jason's hand rested gently on her back, offering quiet support, but Maria's heart raced with uncertainty. She wasn't sure what to expect, but part of her hoped this would finally put an end to Rachel's meddling. The door swung open, and there she was, Rachel, in all her glory, wearing a smug smile. She looked every bit the woman who had ruined Maria's life, basking in her success like she had everything under control. "Maria, Jason. So nice to see you," Rachel said with a practiced sweetness, her eyes flicking to Maria's face, clearly sizing up her discomfort. Come in, come in. It's been a while, hasn't it?" Maria took a deep breath as she stepped inside, Jason beside her. The house was even more extravagant inside. Gleaming marble floors, designer furniture, and expensive artwork lining the walls. Rachel led them to the living room, where Jason's relatives, who had never been to Rachel's home, exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by the opulence. Maria's stomach churned, but she held her ground, determined to face Rachel head-on. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. She carried on chatting, almost too casually, completely unaware that Maria and Jason had come with a plan to expose the truth. Jason's calm, collected demeanor shifted as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Maria could feel her pulse quicken as Jason handed it to Rachel, who took it without hesitation, her eyes gleaming with that familiar sense of superiority. "What's this?" Rachel asked, her tone almost bored, as if she already knew what was coming. "You'll want to take a look," Jason replied, his voice steady, though there was an edge of finality to it. "Open it." Rachel shrugged, tearing open the envelope with an air of indifference. But the moment she saw the contents, a detailed statement of her extravagant purchases, her expression faltered, just for a second. The thick stack of paper was filled with charges from high-end stores, jewelry boutiques, and luxury goods. Each entry was written with precision, a record of a shopping spree that stretched over several years, all charged to the credit cards that Maria and Jason knew Rachel had abused so carelessly. "What is this?" Rachel snapped, her smug attitude beginning to slip as she scanned the document. "Why are you showing me this? What does this have to do with anything?" Jason's voice was calm, but there was a quiet power behind it. "You've been living beyond your means, Rachel. These charges didn't just come from nowhere. You've been using your credit cards like a free pass to indulge in whatever you wanted, and now it's catching up with you. Don't pretend this isn't your responsibility." Rachel's face reddened as she continued to flip through the pages, her hands trembling slightly. This isn't right. This has to be some kind of mistake. I didn't authorize these charges. This is just ridiculous." Maria could see the shift in Rachel. The smug, self-assured woman she had once known was now unraveling. She had always thought of herself as untouchable, as someone who could lie and manipulate without consequence. But now, as the weight of her actions began to hit her, the facade cracked. Rachel's denial grew louder. "I didn't do this. You can't just accuse me of—" Jason cut her off. "It's not just accusations, Rachel. We have proof. These aren't just your random shopping sprees. They're part of a pattern of deceit. You've been living a lie for so long, and now the truth is coming to light." Maria's breath caught in her throat as she saw the truth slowly dawn on Rachel's face. It wasn't just the credit card charges. It was everything. The lies about Michael, the fake pregnancy, the betrayal that had destroyed Maria's family. The past was finally catching up with her, and there was nowhere to hide. Rachel's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was no way out. The truth had been exposed, and there was no turning back now. The tension in the room was palpable. Jason's relatives watched in silence, their eyes wide as the story they'd only heard in fragments started to take shape. Rachel had nowhere to run, and the weight of her past was finally catching up with her. Jason stood firm, his eyes unwavering as he continued. "You've manipulated everyone around you, Rachel. You flaunted the credit card bills and used your family's money to live a life that wasn't yours. And don't even get me started on what you did to Maria." Rachel's face flushed red, and she opened her mouth to speak, but Jason cut her off. "We all know about the affair, Rachel. You had no shame. You stole Tom away from Maria, betrayed her trust in the worst way possible, and destroyed a family. You didn't just break their marriage, you broke Maria, and you did it on purpose. You didn't care who you hurt, as long as you got what you wanted." Maria felt a rush of heat in her chest, the anger that had been simmering inside her finally bubbling to the surface. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Rachel could no longer lie her way out of the truth. "Do you remember the fake pregnancy, Rachel?" Maria's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Do you remember telling everyone I was too busy to notice? You lied about being pregnant just to keep Tom with you. You had no intention of ever being a mother. It was all a game to you." Rachel's eyes widened with disbelief, but Maria could see the guilt creeping in. She had always known deep down that Rachel had never cared about the truth, only about her own desires and how she could manipulate the people around her to get ahead. Jason's voice grew colder. "We all see it now, Rachel. You're not the victim here. You never were. You've lied to everyone. And today, it all ends." Maria stood there, her fists clenched at her sides, unable to hide the fury she had held back for so long. It was time for Rachel to hear the truth. It was time for everyone to see who Rachel really was, the woman who had ruined a family for her own selfish gain. As the heated conversation reached its peak, the doorbell rang, slicing through the tension like a sharp blade. Everyone turned toward the door, but no one expected who would walk through it. Michael. He stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the chaos that had unfolded before him. He had no idea what was going on, but it was clear that something wasn't right. The expression on his face, confusion mixed with concern, was almost comical, but there was no mistaking the weight of the situation. "Is everything okay?" Michael asked, stepping inside, clearly trying to make sense of the scene in front of him. Rachel's face went pale as she quickly tried to regain control of the situation. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, but Maria could hear the cracks in her tone. "This is none of your business." Michael didn't flinch. "I think it is my business, Rachel. I've heard enough." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, the truth seemed to register in his eyes. "You've been lying to me, haven't you?" he asked softly, though the words were heavy with realization. Rachel's breath hitched. She tried to deflect, stammering, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you—" But Michael wasn't having it. "You lied about everything, Rachel. The pregnancy, the affair, everything. I was blind to it before, but I see it now." His voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and anger. "I see you for who you really are." Rachel's mouth hung open as she struggled for words, but none came. Michael's revelation was the final blow. He had seen through her facade. He could no longer ignore the lies she had told, and in that moment, everything that Rachel had worked so hard to protect began to crumble. Maria felt a strange sense of vindication wash over her as she watched Michael come to terms with the truth. It wasn't just her who had been deceived. It was everyone. Michael stood firm, his voice cold as he addressed Rachel. "I can't live with a liar anymore, Rachel. I can't pretend I don't see everything you've done." His words cut through the air, and Maria watched as the reality set in for Rachel. Michael's decision was final. "I want a divorce," he said, his tone unwavering, "and I want full custody of our child." Rachel's face turned white, her body trembling as the weight of Michael's words sank in. Desperation flooded her expression as she tried to hold on to the life she had created through lies and manipulation. "Michael, please," she pleaded. "You can't do this. Think of our family, of everything we've built together." But Michael wasn't swayed. "What family, Rachel? You've destroyed everything. You've lied to me, lied to all of us, and I can't ignore it anymore. You're not the woman I married." Rachel's attempts to manipulate the situation fell flat. She tried to use their child as leverage, but it was too late. Michael was resolute, and soon the legal proceedings began. The divorce was finalized swiftly, and Michael was granted full custody of their child. Rachel's world, which she had built on deceit, crumbled around her. As Maria watched from a distance, she couldn't help but feel a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. Rachel's reign of lies had finally ended, and justice had been served. With the divorce behind her, Rachel's life began to unravel. The financial irresponsibility she had built up over the years caught up with her quickly. The credit card bills piled up, and her once luxurious lifestyle began to feel like a distant memory. Her efforts to escape the debts she had accumulated using Tom's credit cards were futile. Creditors came after her, threatening lawsuits, and her reputation was shattered beyond repair. She tried to run from the mess she had created, but there was no escaping the consequences of her actions. Maria watched from afar as Rachel spiraled, unable to avoid the fallout of her lies and manipulation. Her once enviable life was now a cautionary tale, a testament to the dangers of deceit. Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of justice as she saw Rachel struggle with the reality of her own choices. One final encounter took place between Maria and Rachel, and Maria's words were simple but piercing. "You've brought this upon yourself, Rachel. Every lie, every betrayal, it was all your doing. Now you have to live with it. Rachel's attempts to argue fell on deaf ears. Maria had no more sympathy for her. She had destroyed Maria's family, and now she was paying the price for it. It was a bitter end to a bitter story, but it was an end nonetheless. As time passed, Maria found peace. It hadn't come easily, but it had come. The journey from heartbreak to healing had been long and painful, but now she could breathe again. The weight of the past had lifted, and she was free. Free from Rachel's toxic influence, free from the lies and the betrayal. Maria reflected on everything that had happened, how her life had been shattered and rebuilt. She had found love again in Jason, a man who loved her for who she truly was. And together they had created a new family, one built on trust and honesty. Her daughter was thriving, and they had a future to look forward to. Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude as she looked at her new life. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And most importantly, she had found peace within herself. It wasn't the life she had expected, but it was hers, and that was enough. The story closed with Maria and Jason sitting together, watching their daughter play in the yard. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Maria felt ready for it. She had healed from the past, and she was finally at peace. "Look how far we've come," Jason said softly, squeezing her hand. Maria nodded, her heart full. "I never thought I'd get here, but now I can't imagine going back. We're finally moving forward." They looked out at the horizon, the promise of a new beginning stretching before them. For Maria, it was a new chapter, one where her past no longer defined her. But just as they were beginning to settle into their new life, an unexpected email arrived. Rachel's final plea for help, a desperate attempt to manipulate Maria one last time. Maria stared at the email, but instead of feeling anger or fear, she felt nothing but a quiet resolve. Rachel's games were over. The past was behind her, and Maria had no intention of ever looking back. With a deep breath, she hit delete. And for the first time in years, Maria knew that the story was finally over.